Well, the time has arrived. The moment is now. The podcast is happening. The tell-all interview with my guest, Shane McMahon. Shane, I appreciate you joining me here. And I just want to tell you, you can relax. There's absolutely no pressure. This has not been hyped. There's no expectations here.
Zero.
Your father's not watching. Like, there's.
He's definitely watching.
This is, I almost miss the days when I used to blame things on lack of publicity. This is not one of those things. Like, you and I are out here. This is pretty big.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited that I got the call. I feel the need to tell the audience at home in the WWE universe that Stone Cold Steve Austin had a serious shoulder injury. I checked with him, I said, how do you feel about me doing this? He was like, hell, kid, the last thing I need to do is be walking through an airport with my shoulder injury. So
exactly.
I'm going to try to fill those huge shoes. I've got a bunch of questions. I'm hoping that we have a great time. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. You're going to tell all, right?
Ready to go.
All right. First of all, I want to ask you, 7 years you were gone. 7 years.
Yep.
What was it like after 7 years to return to the WWE?
Well, it was magical to start. You're talking specifically about Detroit.
Yeah.
And, walking out in front of that crowd was truly, it was humbling, Mick.
Were you expecting that type of reaction?
No, definitely not. I wasn't expecting that, to walk out. And, when you think, again, it had been a long time, 7 years, and like, my return, I always knew I wanted to come back, and I went off, and did a lot of my own things for a while. But coming back, there always had to be a real good reason for it. And one of them is always, I wanted to perform in front of my children. And they're of the age now where that's really cool. So walking out in front of Detroit, again, it was humbling. I didn't expect that reaction. I will forever be indebted to them. That entire audience, and to make me feel like that. I literally am starting to get goosebumps now because
just thinking about it.
When you've been out there, and that crowd just keeps coming and coming and coming, and they just, it just gets bigger.
I'm getting the goosebumps.
It is. It's amazing.
Every wrestler, whether they want to admit it or not, is going to judge their reaction against the reaction of others. And I could not have been happier to see you. I was excited. I've been hoping for the return of Shane O'Mac for a long time.
Thank you.
But at a certain point, I started getting that distinct feeling that I believe this reaction exceeds anything that I've ever received. And at that point, your feelings start to get hurt. But it wasn't just that you were gone. It wasn't just that they were happy to see you. It was really like there was respect. Like a lot of respect built up there, and I hope we can take people on a nice journey through your career and through your life, because it couldn't have been easy growing up as a son of Vince McMahon. Like what was that like, and how did your friends deal with it?
Well, you go way back in the day, growing up, when I was little, and back then television was shot, in 3 or 4 week increments. So my dad was gone a lot. And so like any child, all you really want is your father to be there.
Yeah.
Whether he's a truck driver or, in the military or whatever. And so I missed him. I missed him a lot. So it was difficult growing up, because he was on the road quite a lot. And back then that's what, the business called for guys to be away a lot. But I remember a story my mother tells me is I was sitting next to my dad, and Saturday morning show came on. It was local. And I look up, and then I see my dad on television, and I see my dad next to me. Now, I was like 3 years old, and I look up and I say, "Oh, two dadas." It was like it was very interesting, little dynamic there. So I grew up, always, again, wishing he was there more.
I think that's kind of universal among wrestling children. It's like an ongoing theme. And as far as your friends, like, how are they with that? Is your dad, even among like legendary figures, your dad he's larger than life.
Well, he's iconic. Again, I think I'm just so accustomed to it. Like everywhere you go, it'd always be, it'd be like, hey, Mr. McMahon, hey, Vince, how you doing? So it just became a natural part of, my life. I can't even imagine what it's like for like Brad and Angelina's kids growing up, the Pitts, to be like, wow, they walk anywhere and they're like photographers everywhere and everything else like that. So I guess you just become used to it. That's all.
Shane, for what I've learned of you over the years, you were a handful as a youngster.
Yes.
Your dad is an emotional man. What's the maddest that Vince McMahon ever became at you?
The most mad. It was one time. Well, there were several.
Okay.
So there were several, but one specifically, and it was more, and I completely understand this. So I was a little bit wild, and obviously you're aware I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie.
I am.
And so I was 17, and a buddy of mine came over on his motorcycle, which was a GPZ 750 Kawasaki. So it was the predecessor to the Ninja motorcycles. And my dad would always be like, "You definitely never get on that thing," etc. So I remember.
So your father is acting as the voice of reason.
Voice of reason. He told me,
Okay.
"Don't you ever get on that, because I know how you are and your dirt bikes and stuff
Yeah.
like that." So anyway, one day I just I got on it and I ran out with I was wearing shorts, sneakers, and my hat backwards. That's basically
Yeah.
at 17. There's no helmet law, and I was living at my dad's house, obviously at that time in Connecticut, so no helmet law. And I took off on that bike. I mean, you can hear me. I mean, fly down the road, and miles away you can hear me. Came back in, zipped in, and I mean, again, different times, so I was definitely exceeding the speed limit by a lot. And I came back in, and my friends were there, and pulled in the driveway, and then my dad, who was, I didn't know, was actually in the back working. He was out by the pool with Pat Patterson working on the show. I didn't know he was home. He came out and said, "Goodbye, gentlemen." And it was, everyone was like, "See you, Shane-O." Like, they bolted because he was imposing and he was pissed.
Yeah.
So that's the most he's ever been mad at me, I think.
But speaking of pools, was there an instance where your father ended up unwillingly in the pool?
Yes, he was very mad at that point. Also, that was for a different reason. There was a big thing. I grew up learning so much of the psychology of the business from two of the greatest minds in it, which was my dad and Pat Patterson, and just sitting and listening. And they would always work by the pool under the little cabana at my house. And so part of the rib is everybody would have to come see them, if they had a meeting or they have to do other things that way. And always, Pat would always set it up that way, and whomever it was always ended up in the pool. So that was kind of like, once they got everything out of that person, they'd be so scatterbrained and like, "Hey, you hungry?" Whatever. That person would end up in the pool. It was kind of like the ongoing gag. So one time I decided that it needed to be Vince. So I was around the same age, so I was crouched down behind a bush, and he was walking. Vince gets deep in thought. He's looking around and just walking through. And I came up from behind him, and I got underneath him, and I pushed him so hard that literally he couldn't do anything about it. And he threw a little temper tantrum. He's like this in the air. He hit that water, okay? I swear to God, in my view, it boiled because he was so hot.
Right.
He came shooting out of that thing, lats flared. You remember, my dad was huge back then.
It was huge.
No, he was huge.
He is huge.
He was. I mean, we're talking really big. And I was just like, oh my God! I saw his face. He would have killed me. So I literally said, "I'm out of here." Got in my car and I bailed. I bailed for the good rest of the day till I called my mom. I was like, "How's he doing? Is he okay? Is he all right?" So he was definitely pissed because I got him and I embarrassed him.
Dude, this day, you bring up Pat Patterson, like I still take every opportunity I can to spend time with Pat. It's like sitting under the learning tree. He never runs out of stories. One of the great minds. Now, Shane, you're not shy with your opinion, a lot of energy. You can rub people the wrong way. Even as a kid, like, did it lead to any bullying? Did you have problems with other kids?
No, I was always an anti-bully, so I never bullied.
No, did you have a problem with kids bullying you?
Oh, bullying me? Yeah. No.
Okay.
None of that.
Okay.
I would never start a fight, but I would always could handle myself pretty well. So.
Which is what I've heard. Now, you mentioned your dad was away a lot. We have something in common. My dad was an athletic director, and he spent an enormous amount of hours away. And one of the ways we spent time is he would take me and my brother with him. So we grew up at every sporting event imaginable, from women's cross country to field hockey to soccer to football, basketball, baseball. Like it was a pretty cool way to be a kid. And that was pretty cool. But yet you grew up spending time with your dad in the larger-than-life, surreal world of WWE. What was that like, having these larger-than-life personalities growing up with these guys?
I mean, you guys have all recently seen the picture of me and my father taking me to my first ever WWE match, and that was the Worcester Auditorium. So I was very, very young. So but going at it from those times, it's just been such a wonderful and invaluable experience. I mean, to see the larger-than-life characters and literally see the maturation of the business go from small little, even armories like the Fall River Armory. There was one specific time I remember that, unfortunately, there was a riot and it happened. And I remember it was getting so bad that my dad took me and did the only thing that he could do, and he stuck me into the bleachers. He says, "You have to stay here to be safe," and put stuff around me and whatever, and put one security guy underneath the bleachers with me. So it was a very interesting, childhood to be able to grow up and see the maturation of the business. And you look at going from a little armory from where that is to literally a global phenomenon of, where the business is today. And it's very impressive, and I'm very proud of it.
As you should be. A couple of guys I was told had a big influence on you. Andre the Giant, Billy Superstar Graham.
Mm-hmm. They did. Andre, I always wanted to be his tag team partner. And I was going to win the WWE Tag Team Championships with him. And I always told my dad, I said, "Look, I'm going to grow up to be big like Andre, not small like you. I'm going to just eat my vegetables and all the other stuff." So that's what Andre would always tell me. So that was fun. Superstar Billy Graham, I just loved his whole shtick. It was the gift of gab. It was the look. It was the feel. He would always, he'd always hang out with me a little bit in the locker room because, again, to your point, your dad took you everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd be in the locker room, so I was kind of
like a mascot.
I was like a mascot. And oh my God, the ribs those guys would do to me would be brutal.
Don't leave us hanging here. Like,
brutal. Oh, Fuji, Morocco, all those guys. There was a guy, Baron Miguel Cicluna. He was always famous for smoking the big cigars. And
by the way, you know what I got from Cicluna? Cicluna would always go for the foreign object in the least subtle way imaginable. This. So when it was time for me to go for the sock, I didn't take the shortest distance from here to here. This is all Baron Miguel Cicluna, like you learn from the
histrionics. Exactly. So those guys would lock me in lockers, blow cigar smoke up in there, put me like Morocco, stuffed me in the big oil drum trash can, kicked me down, kicked me down a few steps, and everything was all funny, and then stretched me. Oh my God. I mean, that's really where I learned, amateur wrestling is just getting stretched and submitted and just put in an immense amount of pain. That's why you never want to quit. You're just like, screw this. You get tough.
And you think that was part of the learning process?
Without question. Without question. I mean, that is once again invaluable. There is no one, including Vince, that has had the education that I've had in this business. My dad grew up in this. My dad got into this business much later, and I have learned so much. I'm so very proud of him, but I also learned so much differently than he did. You pick up so much stuff almost through osmosis, and sitting around the masters as you hear learning about psychology of the business. I learned the business completely backwards. I learned psychology first and what to do and when to do it and why to do it. I learned all of those things. And then when it came time to do a match, I was like, oh, wow, that's, obviously you have to have the physical aspect to be able to do that also. But you put two and two together, and again, this is the psychology piece of where to put things is always usually the most difficult.
But you've learned the psychology, which usually comes much later. And like a finishing touch. But yet when it came time to actually ply your trade in the family business, you did not start at the top at all.
No.
Very important for your father you to start from the ground up.
Well, you got to, that was and my choice as well.
Take me through that process and tell me about some of the places you worked.
Ever since I was young enough, I was always on the ring crew, even if I was getting turnbuckles out of a bag. I'm talking like 5, 6 years old.
5, 6, okay.
Okay, so very, very young. And you learn, you learn what hard work is.
Yeah.
So setting up the ring is one thing. And
I'm proud of the fact that I was 19. That was my setting up the ring solo.
Yeah, and you get to do that because and I took such pride in it because again, that's where our athletes perform in. You need to make sure it's safe. You need to do all of those things. And That's just one aspect. Taking jackets back, and robes. You start.
did it too.
You
Yeah.
bring them back in there. Then you learn it. Then I learned to referee, and I got to listen to the psychology. One of the biggest learning experiences I had as a referee was working with Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and being involved in their tag team matches. And boy, did they teach me so much about when and where and how. I mean,
great technicians.
Amazing. And again, the psychology aspect of it.
At the time in WWE, you had classic series of matches with the Rockers, right? Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels.
All that.
And you're absorbing all this as a young man.
Of course.
Do you know all along that you want to eventually end up in the ring as a competitor?
No. I mean, when I was younger, yes. I was like, oh, this would be cool. But I also wanted to play football. I wanted to do a bunch of other things. But I always wanted to be involved in the business. And, going back to watching my grandfather and, again, he was the only one who ever really stood up to my dad, and I used to think it was really cool to see, my grandfather, like even when we play pool, during a holiday or whatever, that we'd be down at my grandfather's house in Florida. And my grandfather could push my dad's buttons like no one else. So they'd be playing pool, and all of a sudden, Vince, I call him Grandpa, would he make the shot, like his sixth ball in the corner pocket, make it, and then, Vince's turn would have to happen, and he'd be like, hey, Vinny, I don't know, a big, thick New York accent. He'd be like, a lot of green on that, Vinny, never going to make that. And then Vince, of course, he didn't mean to do the job because he was really trying, but he totally did the job. Miss, and oh my God. And my grandfather would come over to me. He goes, you see that? He goes, your pop just can't handle the pressure. He goes, just can't handle the pressure. And it would drive my dad insane.
Even as an adult.
As an adult.
A friendly game. It was never a friendly game. Never a friendly game.
Never.
Always a competitive.
Always competitive. All right, and that continued generational, by the way.
I can see that.
Very
you don't like to lose.
Oh, I don't like to lose. No, I don't.
It's important for you to be the best at everything you do.
But also Vince as well, and my sister sometimes too. We've had some hellacious pool games, especially when my sister beat my dad once for shoot, and that was it. And then Stephanie said, "You should retire as the champion right now," and she did.
I was just watching Raw and watching Charlotte with that scathing promo on legendary Ric Flair, and I'm waiting for her to pull out the Bull Meacham. One, you're gonna squirt a few, Benny. 1, 2, the one when the kid finally beats him in basketball, and the old Marine colonel can't take it. He can't take the idea that his kids beat him. Like a little bit of that in the McMahon family, a little bit.
I'm sure. It's all competition.
So when you, what age? You're 25 or 26 when you finally take the step to become an in-ring competitor. Is that about the right time frame? That's about,
other than refereeing and things like that. Yeah, you mean actual competitor. That's about right.
So I mean, your fate is set. If you want to continue in the business, you don't need to ever step foot in the ring, but you want to.
Oh, I totally wanted to.
Why?
Because I never really got to, for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I never got to showcase my athletic talent. I wanted to continue to go to college, play football. Had a little knee injury, and my dad kind of talked me out of doing that. So I always had a little bit itch I wanted to scratch. And so when this came up, I was like, well, this is going to be cool. I'm going to
take issue with that. I don't think the McMahon scratch itches. Like, it's not like, okay, I scratched it, it's gone. Like, you guys aren't toe dippers, right? Like, like you dive in. Right?
Well, I dove in completely.
Yeah.
But I had to learn how to work. I had to learn to do all those things.
Who taught you the trade?
Well, again, the psychology aspect. I've had the masters of masters. But physically, the first time I was in the ring was with Dr. Tom Pritchard. And he did a phenomenal job, well, at least for me. He taught me so much. Also, Al Snow. Mr. Sarvin very well.
Yes, I do know Al very well. I make light of him frequently, but in my mind, one of the great underrated teachers. And
performers.
Yeah, and performers as well. And I'm sure he passed down quite a bit to you.
Immensely.
Even though I do remember after he and Bob Holly had a heck of a match in Las Vegas, I asked you to walk up to them and kind of tell them that, you guys, you're kind of taking Mick Foley's gimmick away from them. They just broke their hearts. It's always fun to have a laugh at Al's expense. Do you feel like they went easy on you because you were Mr. McMahon's son?
Oh, definitely not. No.
Did you insist that they not?
Well, of course. I mean, you got to learn. You got to learn what you got. I mean, especially Tom. Being a green guy, like any rookie coming in, you're like, oh man, those guys, the trainers are tough because they have to endure so much punishment until you learn a little bit of how to work and don't actually knock his teeth out, just kind of half knock his teeth out, or a little less than that. So that's one thing. Also have, and then as the years progressed, of course, I have another staple that I always go to and start getting ready, and that's Mr. Tommy Dreamer.
Okay.
So those are from a physical standpoint, and then again, all of the amazing talent that I got to work with, from literally my first match, which I know you know a little bit about.
It was me and you in, I believe, Seattle, Washington.
Right.
Any recollections of that match?
I do. I met Mr. Sacco, and it tasted awful. I do. I remember one thing, and you may not remember this. So the storyline was the Stooges were there. Vince was leaving, and he had to go do something, and Shane's in charge.
Okay.
It's like, all right. And then all of a sudden, it's like, I'm going to get that Foley, So that's basically what the storyline was. And I remember getting in the ring and dancing around.
Oh, you had the jab pumping, yeah.
We were having fun in there. You're like, bang, bang, bang. I'm like cracking you and cracking you. I'm like, oh, all of a sudden you're like, all right, hit the ropes. I'm like, bang, bang, bang. You look again, you're like, hit the ropes. Bang, bang, bang. I'm like, so I'm pumped up. I'm not really listening, because I'm not used to listening.
Right, yeah.
I'm just used to kind of doing. You'd be like, all of a sudden you crack me, wham, and you go, are you going to listen? I was like, whoa. I was like, what? Hit the ropes. I went, oh, yeah. Then I hit the ropes, and then bang. And then here comes the bumping, and you crushed me. And then all of a sudden you set it up, and you took over from there. You're like, don't move. And then comes that flying knee. I wish I did move. It was like my whole jaw. A little stiff, Mick. A little stiff.
I hate to hear that.
No, it's okay. It was good. It was good. I probably moved. And then tasting Mr. Sacco, which was horrible because I don't even know where you kept that thing.
He was always clean.
It was always clean?
He was always clean.
Sure.
After a couple of weeks, I realized I was quickly becoming the least, popular person in the dressing room out of respect for the second least since Al was there. Boom. But I always kept it clean. I didn't know what to expect from you there. You did a great job as a character of playing the ultimate coward. As I came to know you better, I came to feel like you were truly fearless. Like people would sometimes put that label on me. I'm like, no, I'm scared all the time. Like I may do things in the face of fear. I'm scared a lot. Like if you were afraid, I never saw it. How do you overcome that when you're 26, 27 years old? You want to earn the respect of the boys, right? They don't really know you. You're playing that character so well. Like, how does that sit with you when you know you're the man without fear, yet you're doing such a convincing job of being the guy who's afraid of everything?
I mean, I was playing a role. I was having so much fun just being in the business and doing all these things. I got to work with you. As I continued, that was my first match. My second match, I worked with the Stooges in a handicap tag team match, and they dressed up as the Road Warriors. And then all that was getting ready for, I guess, my first big pay-per-view match was with X-Pac at WrestleMania, where I won the coveted European Championship.
You say coveted with a note of sarcasm there.
No, it's coveted. It was.
And from there, you start, creating notice, among the fans and the guys in the dressing rooms. I think it's important to know, how important was it to have the respect of the boys in the dressing room?
Extremely. And that's been instilled in me since I've been around the locker room. Again, growing up in the locker room, you always wanted the respect of the boys, and whether that's going to get some of those guys coffee and bringing it in, or making sure their jacket is folded and put in the right place, taking ribs and not stooging anybody off, keeping your mouth shut, never breaking kayfabe. I mean, those were different rules back then, but it's extremely important then, and it still exists today.
Being the boss's son, you could have easily been that guy who slipped in every once in a while in the ring, got what they had coming to him, went back to your role as a spoiled kid, and it could have been, rewind, play again. Like, it could have been a formula that worked for a long time, but you took it to the next level. You became a fearless competitor. You did things that defied belief. You became a great in-ring wrestler. Like, why was that? You're welcome. And it was one of those things where it became like people slowly took notice. It's you and X-Pac at WrestleMania, and the matches with you and Test really catching people's eyes. And by the time you and Kurt Angle do King of the Ring, it's like, this guy is there. Like, this guy has arrived. He's a world-class performer. Like, why did you feel like you had to be that good when it wasn't necessary?
I guess I just always wanted to prove more. I think there's something to being the boss's kid where you want to do, or at least I do, I always did, you want to stand on your own. You want to go that extra mile. And that's really how more of the exciting things started happening in my matches, where I thought it was going to be a very limited run. Matter of fact, one or two.
Yeah.
And to the point that then that grew. But once you start showcasing a lot of those different things, then, the fan base and everyone else, and even me, you start wanting a little bit more, and you want a little bit more, and you want to do a little bit more. And it's pride. A lot of that is, it's kind of my own code. I just want to always do better than I did last time, and I want to go out there and prove to everyone I want to steal the show every time.
Your favorite match of all time that you were involved in?
Favorite match?
Take the current WrestleMania off the table.
Well, I was just about to go
Take that
there.
off the table.
Okay. Favorite match? Most difficult favorite match? I think King of the Ring with Kurt Angle was my favorite match. To your point, I think we accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
And it was an immense amount of fun and pride, and it was one of, I'll tell you what, walking through the curtain when the match was over, I've been told even before that we got a standing ovation. That didn't happen a lot.
No, it didn't
back then, and
right.
it was kind of new. So to see that, I was like, wow, that's really amazing. And Kurt was feeling the same way also, because we're both very, rookie-esque,
Yeah.
There. And then walking back through the gorilla position, and when we both walked back, and the boys in the back, and it's the greatest compliment you can ever get, are all clapping their hands and saying that was an amazing match. That to me was one of the greatest feelings that I'll ever have. Is you had the blessing, if you will, and the nod from the guys in the monitor, because they're the most cynical guys ever.
Oh, yeah.
As you're well aware,
Yeah.
It's called popping the monitor. Everyone's in the back watching, but to have that respect, truly is something that I never forget and stuck with me.
It came grudgingly, but it did come. It was well deserved. Speaking of being the boss's son, can you take me back to the night, November 1997, the Montreal screw job? Because you were there.
I was. Yep.
In the dressing room with the confrontation when Bret Hart and your dad. Right. Can you walk us through that? I don't think we've ever heard about that night from your perspective.
Well, it was a really big build-up, and I don't know how much has been told.
Only a couple of eyewitness accounts.
No, I mean I could tell you.
Yeah.
I'll get to the locker room, but my dad and the build-up to it, he was heartbroken. He was distraught and didn't want things to go down, and was truly, and I was there. He was really begging Bret at that point. He says, Bret, he goes, this is just not the way to do business. He says, you're passing the title cold. It's not good for the business. It's not good for the rest of the boys because you're leaving. It's not healthy for the business, and we need to do something differently. And Brett had a completely different view, obviously. He was obstinate. It was definitely because it was in Canada and he wasn't doing anything like that. And so it just continued to build over the weeks. And finally they had such an impasse that Vince made the call, and by the way, a very ballsy call. And
it should be pointed out,
and really to protect the business,
yeah,
and everybody else. And that's why he did it. It wasn't to be spiteful towards Brett, because he truly begged Brett not to do it, but it was really to protect the business.
And I came to understand that, you know, and I left the company for one full day in the wake of that. And then my wife informed me by phone I just breached my contract and couldn't work anywhere in the world for the next 5 years. Came back and, you know, to your dad's credit, shook my hand, welcomed me back. Another word was never spoken about it. But your dad talked to me and doing what he had to do to some ways save his company. You know, there was a lot on the line that night. And so
correct.
Tensions are running really high. He did what he had to do. Brett's perspective, I can understand why he's angry. Brett walks into his dressing room. They have
Other way
words.
around. So Vince goes this way, and I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
Take it from here.
Take it from here.
So Vince knew, you know, that he was going to go face Brett. Now, this is the type of man that Vince is.
Because it would have been easy to just let Brett do this thing and go, right? Almost any
Vince
other
could have
person
left, he
would
could
have
done
taken off.
But
yeah.
Vince walked in. I said, "You sure you want to do this?" I go, "You know what's going to happen." You know, he says, "Yes." I said, "Well, we're going to go in the locker room." And Vince wanted to walk in the locker room in front of everyone, in front of all the boys, because everybody was in there. Most everybody was in there. And take it like a man. And I said, "He's going to hit you. You know that." He says, "Yep." He says, "Well, he gets one shot." It's like, "You sure you want to do this?" He goes, "He gets one shot." Vince walked in there, you know, and I said, and I was thinking to myself, well, hopefully Brett won't hit him. Hopefully he'll understand a little bit more. But Brett was pissed, came up, and Vince just stood there, and Brett cold-cocked him right in the jaw. Okay? Right in the jaw. You know, stumbled Vince. You know, Vince sat for a minute. Then everybody broke it up. But again, talking about taking it on the chin, Vince literally went in and took it on the chin like a man, like he should have. And that's the type of man that Vince is, because he wanted to show everybody that not only did he do the right thing for business, but he also did the right thing for Brett. You know, and he said, "Well, Brett, you know, I didn't want to do it. This is my version anyway. I didn't want to do what I had to do. I understand why you're pissed. Get out your aggression." And in front of all the boys, too. So kudos to my pops for that.
Definitely, and I only found it tonight after all these years that in trying to help your father, Gerald Briscoe inadvertently broke your father's ankle that night.
Gerald, something. There's a big, he was trying to push people around. And then I think Rude threw Briscoe across the room or something like that. And then Jerry rolled up on his ankle, almost broke it. Yeah.
Well, let's jump to another historic night if we can. I've never heard this from your perspective. This is the night that essentially the Monday Night War was won. WWE takes over WCW. Shane McMahon arrives, and it was in Panama City, Florida?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Panama City, Florida. Shocks the world. My memory is of being there and seeing Stephanie. Stephanie was in the arena WB in tears because it was over. Like, this was a war, and it's over. And, you know, here's Shane O'Mac, enemy territory. Tell me about that day.
Well, it was interesting. Again, we had bought the business from Turner, and my dad, that was Briscoe and Bruce Pritchard, and from a production standpoint, and me, and says, "Okay, you're going down there." I was like, "Okay, here it is. This is what we're going to do." So,
any trepidation, to throw in a good word there?
Of course. I mean, you're walking into guys you've been competing with. Now, some of those guys had been here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I knew them, but you don't know what type of, you don't know what type of reaction you're going to get, because are these guys going to continue on, you know, as the WWE morphs? And that's more of the statement that my dad wanted me to say, which was true, that everyone who wanted the job and wanted to move forward with the company definitely has that shot and that opportunity. But I remember, again, talking about pressure, so I walk into the locker room, and at that time, John Laurinaitis was down at WCW, and he was in charge of the talent aspect and got all the talent together in the locker room. And I walked in and basically told everyone that we had purchased the company. I told them exactly what I just relayed there, but if they want to continue, then there's opportunities there. And just looking around, it's like, wow. If some looks could kill, there were some there. Others were, happy, and just a very awkward and tough setting. So my dad has always had the view with me, specifically purification by fire, in anything I've ever done. And that's how we did this one as well.
You had great chemistry with your father. Yeah, you guys did tremendous things. Whether it was you training him, he's chasing the chicken. The tribute to Rocky Balboa was amazing. You did the thing with Elvis. I love the idea that you were never Shane. You were always my son, Shane. I always love your dad's attention to detail and repetition. And there's a story, I'm not sure if you've ever heard the story. It was told to me by comedian Jim Norton off the air on the Opie and Anthony show.
Yeah, Jimmy, yeah.
He was the comic for your bachelor party.
Yes.
It was a river cruise, was it?
Yeah, we
river
did.
Cruise.
Yeah.
And he told me the two things he remembers about it is that he bombed badly. He said he had a very poor set.
Yep.
And
He had told me that. I had been on the show before.
But he said what he took away from that mostly was the relationship with you and your dad, like the love you guys shared. Like it was, he said, he goes, I honestly was touched. He'd never seen like a father-son, like that kind of bond. Despite all that, I had always heard that your father could be tough on you behind the scenes.
Tough is not the word, but go back to it. Yeah, I asked my dad to be the best man at my wedding because I truly felt that he was that man for that job. When I looked around, I thought about all my friends. I said, who's going to be here in the rest of my life? I said, you know what? And that's why I asked my dad to be my best man. Getting into the toughness aspect, where we can come up with a lot more creative words than that. Brutal is another one.
Right.
His expectations, again, are extremely high. And on top of that, also, it's much more of I need to be an example made to anybody else. So that's more of the, I guess, the toughness that came through.
When I had a little trouble with your dad when I was an announcer, and I thought he was a little tough on me, I was told, you think he's tough on you? You should see the way he treats his kids, as far as demanding and bringing out the best. You think that style brought out the best in you? Do you think he was tougher on you because you were his son?
Oh, without question. Definitely. Did it make me better? Yes, to a point, but there's, every once in a while someone wants at least one pat on the shoulder. Be like, good job. That doesn't come.
Didn't come.
Very rarely.
Rarely,
very,
really?
Very rarely.
Oh. That surprises me. That surprises me because your dad, I did get those pats from your dad.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's strange. It's a weird thing because I think in some way your dad's a father figure to a lot of us here in WWE, and we're all looking for that, that acceptance. And that's strange that I got it a little more often than you did.
Well, once again, that's more of a front in my view of, again, he always held me to a different standard. Still loving, and don't get me wrong, he was a great dad. So don't get me wrong there.
But there came a time, I think it was October 16th, 2009, you make a life-altering decision. You resign from WWE. Like, is that something you just wake up one morning and say, time to try something new, or is this a decision that had been building for a long time?
No, it's a decision that had been building for a while. No different than, and the decision really started to form no different than, my father had with his dad. My dad has certain ideas that he wanted to put in place. And, my grandfather, who held all the cards at that point, was like, no, Vinny, we're not going to do that. One specific thing was to, bring in Hulk Hogan and make Hulk Hogan, the champion.
Your grandfather was against that?
My grandfather was totally against that because, the old school way of thinking was Well, how does a guy who's 6'5" or 6'6" and 300 pounds, how would you get any heat on him? How would you get any sympathy on him? He can't be a baby face, can't do all that. And my dad would just say, look, I knew it, because my dad originally liked Superstar Billy Graham, same as I did, which was obviously the precursor to Hulk Hogan. And then when Hulk came on, it was just a different thing. And obviously that decision paid off very well.
Big time,
it worked.
yeah.
But again, I think with any parent and sibling, or I should say parent and child relationship, it's tough, especially with the older guard, allowing the new guard to flesh those ideas out and try them and go for it, because they're so guarded against it. So
was he not open enough to your ideas?
No. And what grew out of that was, you're asking me the real, the reason that I left the company.
If you had to sum up the reason you left.
It stopped being a collaboration and it stopped being fun. And when that happened, the WWE defines my father.
Right.
And I wasn't going to allow a deteriorating business relationship to affect our personal lives. And that's exactly what was happening. And so I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I love him too much. And I decided to leave. Also, I think there's a lot, when you are the child of a successful parent, that you want to know, can you go stand on your own 2 feet? Can you do it on your own? Or you're always, quote, the boss's kid or whatever.
Right.
And I got to do that. And I'm very proud of the accomplishments that I've made out there. It's also giving me an amazing look into the business now, because I was able to back up away from it and look at it with fresh eyes. In the business currently, and a lot of the creative team and Vince for that matter, sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees. So having a very fresh perspective of what the company, in my view, really needs, and listening to the fans now, it needed a little boost. So,
but was there part of you that just wanted to do what the old man wanted?
What do you mean?
Like it would have been easy just to be Shane O'Mac, that's a difficult decision.
Get in your corner? Oh, I mean, people look at me, they're like, sure, it was difficult, when I left a boatload of cash on the table, and, people look at me like I'm out of my mind. Just shut up and do your job.
Was your dad one of them? How did he react when you gave him that decision? Took it with a smile?
No, it was shocking. It was a bittersweet thing. It was extremely emotional. I shook his hand. I said, look, I just want to say thank you very much for everything you ever taught me. And I love you very much, but this is not working anymore. And again, my relationship with you is way too important. My personal relationship is way too important than this. So it's time for me to go. And he was shocked. Again, it was one of those things, again, bittersweet in my view. I think he was hurt, shocked, proud, kind of all those emotions wrapped into one thing. I can't speak for him, but that's more of what I feel.
I feel like he probably respected it.
So, again, some people look at it as a insane decision. I looked at it as growth.
And in your absence, your sister Stephanie took on a larger role within WWE. How is your relationship with Stephanie?
Oh, fine. I love my sister. I'm proud of her, what she's done, her accomplishments. She has a whole different path.
Did it change when you left?
My relationship?
Yeah.
No. With my sister, no, not at all.
How about the relationship with Triple H?
That didn't change either.
Would you describe it as strong?
My relationship with Paul?
Yeah.
He makes my sister happy, and I'm very happy he does that.
It sounds evasive.
Not evasive.
It's a little. Is there any contention there?
No contention.
Okay. Not. You wouldn't describe it as adversarial at all.
No, we don't have an adversarial relationship at all.
Okay. I'm gonna accept that.
It's the truth. You can accept it or not.
How did you feel about them being married? Any opinion?
At first, it was, as long as they're going to be happy, that's all I really cared about. it was more old school back in the day that, especially the boss's daughter, you don't ever date a talent at that point
Yeah,
because there was
yeah.
separation. At that time, it was church and state, or office and the boys, if you will. So there's a lot of old school stuff in there. The thing that didn't sit well with me is it was kept from me for a while. So that didn't feel good. But other than that, as long as my sister's happy, then that's great. As long as they're happy, I'm happy for them both. They got great little girls, my nieces, I love
And
them.
I hate to bring up this word, because we're having a good discussion here. Any jealousy towards Stephanie as she progressed in the business? Any regrets on your part for taking so long off?
Zero.
With that being said, what is it that brought you back to WWE?
A phone call from my father, followed by one from The Undertaker. And I always knew that, one day I would always want to return, but I have to be under the right circumstances. And the biggest reason, which I've said a couple of times, is really my children. My boys, Declan, Kenny, and Rogan are of the age now where they never got to see me live ever.
Right.
So it's, they get to watch me on the WWE Network or YouTube, or, they dig up an old DVD and they laugh about, what's this thing? It's like a Frisbee to them. So they never got to see me live. And I always said, if the right opportunity, and I talked about that a lot with Marissa, who my wife.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, if, it's kind of like the perfect storm came together, the right scenario all blended. And we had this great thing to do at WrestleMania. I said, you know what? I just feel it's time. It's the right time to go do it.
See, I wanted to have one last match in WWE for my kids. My younger kids had never seen me in WWE. And I did Royal Rumble, where I actually, my pitch to the company was, no one man can ruin the Rumble, right? I'm one of 30 men, but yet you come in, you've been away for 7 years, and you're not just having a match, you're having the match in the largest, biggest event in the history of our industry, with this mythical figure in this legendary match. What's going through your mind? Can you possibly live up to the legacy?
I didn't, I don't know. Again, take you back. So I get the call from my dad.
Yeah.
And this is probably 3 weeks before Detroit, something like that.
Yeah.
And we discussed the potential of it. I've been friends with The Undertaker for a long time, ever since really he came in 1990. So we've traveled the road together. We've done a lot of those things. And we have a great friendship. And he and I would talk every once in a while. It'd really be cool to go do this, or, have a match. It just never seemed right, two baby faces, at that time, doing some stuff. And we had done some stuff, And
I think it should be said that, we're looking towards the biggest event in the company's history, and some of the biggest stars in the roster are on the shelf. We need a boost in a hurry. We need something big.
Hence the phone call from my dad. And it really was, I was flattered and humbled, at the same time, that, Mark Undertaker would have the confidence and want to do that with me. And I said, you know what? I told Marissa, I said, this is it. This is the right time. It's the right venue. It's right to come back. So, when we got there, and again, that brings us back to Detroit, man, we set the ball in motion, and man, it was off and running.
It was big. And there's something, all due respect to all the other superstars in WWE, but there's something about The Undertaker, right? If you're standing out there, you have this amazing entrance with your kids. Where did that come about?
Well, I had thought of it, and I brought my kids, Declan, Kenny, and Rogan, and brought them back, and Marissa was back there with me. And, I gave her a wink, and I told her that I want to do this. And then about 7 minutes before my entrance, I said, "Hey guys, would you do me the honor? Would you you want to come out with me?" They're like, "Seriously? Like, really?" You know, I was like, "Yeah, that would be." I said, "Would you do me that honor and come out with me?" They're like, "Absolutely." And they had been to AT&T Stadium the day before, and they were like running around with me, looking at the spectacle.
It's
and
just
like,
majestic.
it was to see that place empty, but to see it full was like, what an energy. Anyway, when those guys came out, you know, I couldn't be. It's one of the proudest moments of my life. Something I'll never forget. And to watch them and see those little faces, and I was giggling to myself a little bit. I'm like, look at these little dudes. It's like they weren't intimidated. They were sucking it up and having a great time, and they were totally into everything that we were doing.
I just got the goosebumps again because I'm thinking back, like in my case, when Steve Austin's music hit and I knew there were no eyes on me, I just looked around that stadium and I thought, oh my God, like I may never see anything like this again. I'm going to absorb as much of it as I can. Was there that sense that this is an amazing feeling?
That's what I was. I mean, I get, you know, choked up thinking about to see those little guys out there and running around, and you know, it's a magical moment. It'll never be replicated, you know, in front of 100,000, or as my son's correcting me, 101, Dad.
101.
You know, 101 plus, to actually watch them, and I was so proud, you know, to be out there, and that's really one of the things that it was all about, and I truly meant when I said, you know, as I returned to WWE, that, you know, again, I have a different mindset and a different view. I think the product is starting to get that buzz again, and it needs to for that generation and generations to come. So I'm very, very excited about it.
Let me take that word buzz as a segue to point in that match, right? I've long maintained that it's moments, you know, moments that define greatness. You know, it's moments that make those great matches that our fans will hold on to for decades, if not a lifetime, right? And you've got the potential here. As soon as we hear Shane McMahon's in Hell in a Cell, all of a sudden everyone thinks to themselves, this might be the year. Like, this might be the year. So the Undertaker's on the table, and we see you glance up at the cell, right? And is there a more powerful feeling in the world? Like, you've got 101,000 fans in the palm of your hand, right?
Yeah, it's tough to replicate that feeling.
You know you're going skyward, right?
Yeah, I know that.
And we know that not everybody was in favor of that decision of Shane O'Mac taking flight, right?
No, there was only one.
Okay.
Which is me.
Everybody else thinks it's a really bad idea.
Yeah, well, you started all this stuff.
Now, I'm asked all the time, right? Because we're talking to two guys, only two guys who know. And I talked to Jericho today, and I said, I'm so glad that he wrote in his book that he was thinking about it, but he said the people look like ants. I'm not exaggerating. People look like ants. So when you're up there, right, I'm asked, like, what was the difference? How would you compare Shane's and yours? I go, okay, here's the difference. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, and I swear to you, I don't want to kill my character. I don't want people to think less of me. If I could have found a graceful way to scale back down that cell, I would have done it. I was terrified, you know, and what happened, and the Undertaker and I kind of walked our way into the pages of wrestling history, but it was absolutely terrifying, okay? Worst decision I ever made. You knew what price would be paid, and yet you did it anyway. Why?
I felt, well, first off, you know, again, it's not the flight, it's a sudden stop that gets you.
It was sudden. It was sudden.
You know, I mean, it was a new structure.
And I should point out, the cell you took flight from was considerably higher than the one I took flight from.
Like, it's all, at the end of the day, I mean, it's still, you know, when you have the grapefruits, as you did, as I did, to go do that, it really doesn't matter. And it did it for very similar reasons that I did. I felt that the match needed it. Again, going back to the psychology of, I knew I wanted to do it from the announcement.
This is what I want to ask you. This is what was going through my mind.
Go ahead.
You said you wanted to. Mm-hmm. Did you want to, or did you need to?
I don't know if the match...
Talking about as a man, like as a Shane O'Mac, not for the sake of the match. as a person, man against himself?
Oh, I wanted to do it. Did I need to do it? Probably. I think I need, like I said, I'm more of an adrenaline guy, and I need to feel. I need to feel that.
There was something I needed to do that night. When I saw you laying out there, I felt like I needed to be the first person you saw when you came through that
Yep.
curtain. Like, I wasn't going to mess around with the medical staff. I was going to give you that time. And I got up, and it was important for me to be that first guy you saw. And, you talk about moments, in time that define matches, or moments in time that define friendships. And I have two that I'll remember you by. I'll remember that you reached out to me right after my dad passed, which was very important to me. And I hope that you'll remember that I was the guy that was there when you walked through that curtain. And I gave you a hug, and you said, do you remember what you said to me? You said, you set the bar.
Oh, yeah.
You set the bar. So that's what I'll remember about you. And if we may take just a couple minutes to ask you about the current product, do you like where things are heading?
Before I do that, and again, the great thing about the WWE Network is we control this time, so we're going to go a little bit heavy.
Let's do it. You call the shots, right?
Well, Adam Panucci over there is trying to call the shots, really. But going back to the Hell in a Cell matchup,
Let's do it. All right, thank you, because that was kind of an abrupt halt, right? We got something emotional going.
This is emotional.
Yeah, yeah.
Back, my kids were there.
Yeah, and I'm talking about what I have to do as a man. Hey,
of course.
You can't tell that I'm being told to ask about the current product.
Can you? I get a feel. I get a feel on this thing. So anyway, let's go off on our own page. Go.
All right, okay, I like that, Shane. Thank you.
Right here in Baltimore, Maryland.
Gee, wait, as long as we got a couple of seconds here, the lowest point of my career when I came back, I'd been away for a while, and I think the last words I'd said to your father were, they involved this finger wagging and saying the words, "I don't care who you are." I remember my name. You'll never talk to me that way again. And then like 2.5 years later, that same finger dialed the phone and said, same voice said, "Can I come home now?" So I came back. I wasn't didn't have the same mojo, and it was here in Baltimore that I was given 2 lines to learn, and unlike the old promo cutting Mick Foley, I rehearsed in my mind for about 4 hours, and I walked out there and I nailed the first line. I said, "I'll be your new guest general manager of SmackDown," because to quote a friend of mine, John Lawrence has been fired. Did a little Vince for them in his head. And then the second line I went, and I just drew a blank.
Spaced.
For 2 minutes and 32 seconds, I did nothing. And I finally walked over to Marty on camera, and I said, "I have no idea what I'm supposed to say." And he shows me a paper, and I came back, and I said, "It's great to be right here in Baltimore, Maryland." And I was like, I'd fallen so far, it was and tell you the truth, it wasn't that great to be right there in Baltimore, Maryland. But pressure's off. Let's pick up the pieces. Take me back to WrestleMania.
So again, that's a funny story. But to be, as you said, the Undertaker he's iconic.
Yeah.
He stands alone. And again, to have been chosen to be in there, Vince asking me, Taker asking me, and to tell the story that we were able to tell. I'm so very proud of that entire match, and being in there, with him being one of my longest and truest friends. I mean, when you're in there with your buddy and you're really pulling stuff off, and we're teeing off on each other. He's a big dude. He hits you, you're like, oh my God. And we're just out there and kind of snickering and laughing a little bit on some things. When you really tag your buddy and you start laughing. So there are a bunch of moments in there that are only, that are special to us. But being able to tell that story and do that with him, and dare I say, steal the show. It's again, it won't be, from my standpoint, I don't think it'll be replicated because, having my kids there, my return, I mean, everything just lined up so perfectly. I will tell you this, after the match was over, I went back up, through gorilla position and came in there. And one of the things, I went over and I hugged my dad and I broke down. And I was, kind of a sobbing mess. So it was both, obviously going through so much, physical aspects of it, everything leading up to it, all of the family dynamics, being gone over 7 years. WrestleMania, the very event that, my father created, being a part of that, thinking about my grandfather as my dad does. He thinks about his dad and what would he be doing. So all of those emotions came flooding through. And both of us were, crying, holding each other in an embrace. And that is yet another magical moment that I won't forget ever. WrestleMania 32 for me was the greatest ever, because my entire family was there.
So you would say the McMahon embrace was bigger than the McMahon Foley embrace?
For me, it was. I don't know if maybe for you, but for me, definitely.
And the wrestling's.
And by the way, I got one of my first pats on the back that night.
Oh,
well, great job.
Wow.
So
Long time coming.
Meant a lot.
Well deserved. WWE, it's about creating moments, magic moments. You did it that night for 101,000 fans live, millions around the globe. I'm glad that it created one for you and your dad. Thanks. It's a long time coming. I want to thank you personally for being so open and for having me as the person you chose to help.
Are we told we're getting cut now?
You know what, Shane? I'm going to be completely honest with you. We could have gone back and gone to the current product.
Okay.
Good.
We could save that for part two.
Once you tell the story about you and your dad,
going on the high road.
There's no better place to go than that, and I think that's a perfect way to end the story.
Psychology.
I'd be glad to. It's no sense in kicking out of that finish, and then ending with a roll-up. So thank you so much for being my guest, man. I respect the heck out of you. Proud to call you a friend. We shared some rare air together, and thank you all, the WWE Network. Have a nice day.